Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is actually the fourth webinar in our STEM webinar series for 2020, and this webinar is entitled STEM Best Practices for Managing the Impacts of COVID-19, Supporting Student Learning and Motivation. I'm really glad to have the awesome speakers that we have today. My name is Iris Wagstaff. I am a STEM Program Director at the American Association for the Advancement of Science, or AAAS. And I am also the Principal Investigator of the National Science Foundation STEM Initiative. Next slide, please. So before I share a little bit about the AAAS STEM Initiative, I do want to go over the format for today. We will actually have a group or joint Q&A for both speakers at the end after both presentations. And we will also share the slides and the webinar recording within the next 2 or 3 days on our STEM website, so you can check back with us on Friday. We also will be sharing a survey that we would love for you to complete to let us know your thoughts and impressions and input on this webinar. And we hope that you can join us for the final webinar in our series, which will be in November. So definitely please look out for promotions for that over the next few weeks. So a little bit about the AAAS STEM Initiative. This initiative was started in 2018, and the title of this grant is Developing an Evidence-Based Best Practices Community for Supporting Low-Income, High-Achieving Students in STEM Education and the Workforce. And I'd like to acknowledge the National Science Foundation for supporting this 3-year effort. The goals and objectives of this initiative are to share effective STEM undergraduate education and workforce preparation strategies, to facilitate collaboration and networking across projects and within projects, and also to generate a sense of community among those seeking to expand academic opportunities for low-income STEM students. The first effort in this initiative was our symposium that we held in 2019 in September. We convened about 650 STEM PIs as well as non-PIs and others from the broader STEM education community. And we are looking forward to having our second and final STEM symposium around the same time in September or October of 2021. And again, this year was devoted to our webinar series, which concludes in November. For more information about the STEM initiative, you can visit our website at www.stem.AAAS.org. Next slide, please. So I'd just like to acknowledge our project team. In addition to myself, we have Allison Gonzalez, who is our program associate, and then we have Kate Winter, who is our external evaluator. And I'd also like to acknowledge our advisory board members, Karen Birch, David Brown, Kelly Mack, Yvette Pearson, and Ivory Tolson. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to introduce our 2 presenters for today. First up, we will have Jennifer Drew, who is a senior lecturer at the University of Florida. And our second speaker will be Michelle Jones-Wilson, professor and department chair at E. Stroudsburg University of Pennsylvania. So I will turn it over to Jennifer to get us started. We hope you enjoy.
Thank you, Iris. I hope that everyone can hear me. I am the PI of an STEM grant on behalf of the Microbiology and Cell Science Department in the College of Agricultural and Life Sciences at the University of Florida. And I'm here to talk to you today about the academic and emotional impacts of COVID on our students. I'm speaking on behalf of our team. And I'd like to give a special thanks to Dr. Lexi Artisan, Dr. Galindo, who's our evaluator, and Dr. Triplett, who is the chair of our department and a co-PI on the grant, who helped with the presentation today. So I'm going to get right to the two main take-home messages from this talk, one describing our two main COVID impacts that we have felt for our STEM program. One is that because of the COVID-related policy change by the NSF that stated that students did not have to be exclusively full-time to receive the STEM grant, we were able to award scholarships to part-time transfer students in late spring 2020 and continue to do so moving into fall 20. And thereby we expanded the participation of non-traditional and diverse students, so we're excited about that. The second main message is that we surveyed all of our students and then about the impacts of COVID on them academically and emotionally, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. But the bottom line is that the STEM students and on-campus transfer students are experiencing more severe impacts than other students in response to COVID. A little bit of background information about our microbiology and cell science program that I want you to keep in your mind as we move through these slides is that we have three main types of students, three main pathways. One is that what many think of as the quote-unquote traditional pathway. That's where students begin in high school and then they come to the University of Florida as freshmen. They're called FTICs, first time in college, and ideally 4 years later they get their bachelor's degree in microbiology and cell science. We also have transfer tracks, and the transfer tracks I'm going to talk about today are the 2+2 tracks. So students go to high school and then they go to a 2-year serving institution, a Florida public 2-year serving institution, get their AA degree, and then they transfer into the microbiology and cell science department at the University of Florida. Some of them are on-campus transfers, so they move to the main campus and finish up their 4-year degree there. Some of them are in our online transfer track, and that track was developed in 2011. It was designed and developed in close partnership with Miami-Dade College, which is also our partner institution on our STEM grant. And so many of our transfer students start at Miami-Dade College. They don't have to. We're open to all of them, but many do go in that pathway. And our online transfer students get their AA degree. Then they take all of their courses. They transfer to the University of Florida as online students, so they do not have to physically relocate. They can remain where they are, and many of these students have a lot of barriers to relocating, so this allows this non-traditional population to continue their educational path, and they take all their courses as lecture courses except for their lab courses, which are face-to-face. So I'm going to move back one slide. Our STEM program targets students in the transfer tracks, the on-campus and the online transfer tracks. That's the population of students that we are trying to serve. We were awarded our STEM grant in 2017, again in partnership with Miami-Dade College. To date, we've awarded 112 scholars at the University of Florida that have transferred with their AA into our bachelor's program. These are scholars in the on-campus and online tracks, although most of them are in the online transfer track. We've had some good success with the STEM scholarship program so far. Our retention rate for STEM scholars is higher than our transfer retention rate. So 2 years post-transferring into our program, 66% of the STEM scholars have graduated with their 4-year degree. Compare this to only 36% of our transfer students without the STEM scholarship have graduated with their 4-year degree 2 years after they transfer. So we see an increase in retention, we see an increase in GPA, and we certainly see increased diversity in STEM, in our STEM scholar population. 63% of them are women, 41% of the students are underrepresented minorities in STEM. This level is reflective of the state of Florida demographics, and we are pleased with that because Florida is a pretty diverse state, and that's a metric, a benchmark that we aim for. The average age of our STEM scholars is 24, so that's a little bit of a higher age than our FTIC students, our non-transfer students, so a more non-traditional population, diverse and non-traditional. I talked about the online track before. Just wanted to say again that all our lab courses are face-to-face except when COVID happened, and then we had to shift. But because we already taught so many of our courses online and we're familiar with online delivery modalities, we were able to pivot very quickly in spring 2020 because of COVID. So our students in our program did not come back to face-to-face lab courses after spring break. Once they went home for spring break, they didn't return for face-to-face labs. All of our lab courses were delivered in a hybrid online modality after that. So we're really interested in exploring factors that affect the success and retention of transfer students, and we've made some observations of the transfer students in our program, and this is consistent with what others see about transfer students in the literature. And by transfer students, for the purposes of this presentation, I mean transfer students who are in that 2+2 pathway, the AA to Bachelor's of Science pathway. Our transfer students are more likely to be underrepresented minorities, more likely to be women, older, financially independent, more likely to be lower income, have dependents. We have a lot of working parents, more likely to have full-time jobs than people who are not transfer students. And yet the transfer students have lower retention, lower GPAs than our non-transfer students, and they also enroll part-time a lot more frequently than our non-transfer students. And it's this point in particular that I'm going to focus in on because, as we know, the STEM grant until recently required full-time enrollment. So we were interested in this characteristic of our transfer population because this was the population we were interested in helping. And we looked at our different student types and found that for our transfer students in the online track, and they're shown in the red box on the right-hand side, overwhelmingly, 75% of them enrolled less than full-time. Full-time at the University of Florida is defined as 12 credits per semester, and they enrolled less than that overwhelmingly. So we were interested in learning more. Why are they enrolling? There we go. Less than full-time. So we surveyed the students and did a needs assessment, and we found that in spring 2019, over 40% of eligible transfer students were excluded from the STEM scholarship opportunity only because of their enrollment status. So these students they had financial need, they were low income, they met the GPA requirements, they were enrolled, they were STEM students in our microbiology track. The only thing that was holding them back was that they were enrolling less than full-time. So we really wanted so we were missing out on a key group of students that we were really intending to help and to serve. So we gave them a survey to ask and did some more analysis to try and figure out why some students go full-time instead of part-time, or go full-time instead of part-time. And what we found is that full-time enrollment is very challenging for some students more than others. And for students in this online transfer track, and they're shown in the top row there, these are their responses to a Likert scale question of how difficult it would be to enroll full-time if they had to. Almost all of them, I think almost over 90% of the online transfer track said it would be difficult, if not impossible, to enroll full-time if they had to. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Like I said, some of them are parents and things like that, but it's just not an option. Now, there generally are policies and a push for enrolling, there we go. Policies exist to support full-time enrollment, and this is in part because in the literature there's been studies that have shown that part-time enrollment is associated with lower retention, lower GPA, poor academic outcomes. And although people have seen that in studies, of populations of students who are first time in college. We do not see that in our online transfer track. Our online transfer track that enrolls almost exclusively part-time doesn't have those negative outcomes. It has a higher GPA and higher retention than their full-time transfer counterparts. So with this subgroup of students, part-time enrollment does not affect their outcomes. So this is a good group of students to invest in. And as you all are aware, in spring 2020, COVID changed everything. So to kind of paint a picture of where we were and where we are now as a department, fall 2019 to fall 2020, our on-campus FTIC enrollment has decreased. Our on-campus transfer enrollment has increased. Our online transfer enrollment has increased. Our underrepresented minority participation has increased overall throughout our major from 25 to 32%, so big jump there, driven in large part by the increase in the transfer enrollment. All of our lecture courses remain online, and our lab courses, as I mentioned before, have now pivoted to an online, remote format, and will continue that way for now. I should say University of Florida is not exclusively online. Students are back in campus. Many courses switch to online format, but students may be taking some face-to-face courses as well. But our department is all online. The biggest impact for us in spring 2020 was the policy change for the STEM full-time enrollment eligibility criteria. So I just wanted to say thank you very much to NSF for adjusting that policy. We were able to, because we had been studying this group of students and advocating for this part-time policy change and hoping for it, we were able to award 8 students right away part-time scholarships in late spring 2020, and we're seeing the biggest impact now in our fall 2020 new entering STEM scholar cohort, whereas last year we only had 4 STEM scholars who were from the online transfer track. This year we have 18. Half of those students are going less than full time. And we took a look across the board at all of our students, not just STEM students, to see how course load had changed from fall 2019 to fall 2020. So if we had any microbiology majors who were continuing students, we looked at their enrollment shift, and we found that overall there was very little change in the course load taken by students. So by and large, students who tended to go full-time continue to go full-time. We are tracking students who are our STEM scholars who are part-time, enrolled part-time. We're tracking them very carefully because we're very eager and interested to see how this works out, and we are excited to soon share. We'll know some more at the end of fall 2020, and then of course spring 2021 to share this with the broader STEM community, how part-time scholarships helps these students. Okay, so that was kind of our first major impact from COVID. The second thing that I would like to talk to you about today is a survey that we gave to all of our students. So late spring 2020, we were interested in how COVID was affecting our STEM scholars. As we began to develop a survey, we thought, well, let's give the survey to all of our microbiology majors and then compare how different students may be impacted by COVID in different ways. We captured 17% of all of our microbiology students with this survey. 18 of the respondents were STEM scholars. We developed this survey. It's a 50-item instrument in collaboration with our evaluator, Dr. Sebastian Galindo, who had a lot of experience in surveying students and faculty for impacts of COVID. So what we found is that overall, across the board, students did not report major academic impacts from COVID. 12% withdrew from a course, 20% elected to take an SU option. Our institution offered students for spring 2020 an option to take satisfactory, unsatisfactory instead of a letter grade if they wanted. 42% felt that their GPA might be decreased or had decreased, and 84% said did not anticipate any delay in their graduation plans because of COVID. So that's the general thing. But as I explained before, we have different groups of students, as we all do at any institution, and students are affected differently. So what happens when we take a closer look at the different student pathways? So that's what we did, and from here on out, I'm going to show you how the effects of COVID impacted 4 different groups of students. We have our FTIC students, who are the first-time in college students, non-transfer students. The OCTR students, which designates our on-campus transfer students that did not receive the STEM scholarship. Our ONLTR group, which is the online transfer group, those are the online transfer students that did not receive the STEM scholarship. And then we have the STEM scholars. These students are transfer students. They can be on campus or online. Of the survey respondents, most of them, all but I think 1 or 2 of the respondents, were in the on-campus transfer group. So comparing the on-campus transfer results to the STEM results is an interesting comparison because they're very similar, except one group has the STEM scholarship and the other group does not. Let me go back. So once we start looking at these results by different groups, we see some differences. The STEM students reported more academic impacts. A greater proportion of STEM students reported having to withdraw from a course. 61% compared to 18% reported electing that SU option. 72% felt that they had a decreased GPA, and about half indicated that they expected a delay in graduation. So they're reporting academic impacts more frequently. We followed up on the decrease in GPA, and we looked at all students in our program who were enrolled fall 2019 to fall 2020 and compared and looked for a change in GPA. Just like we looked for a change in enrollment status, we looked to see how their GPA changed. And again, by and large, we found very little GPA change in our different groups of students from fall 2019 to fall 2020. So that perceived decrease in GPA due to COVID was not confirmed among all the continuing students. When asked if they felt that any adjustments due to the response to the COVID pandemic will have or will significantly negatively affect their education, we asked students to agree to that statement according to a Likert scale, and shades of red and orange kind of indicate agreement, blue indicates disagreement. We saw some differences there. Again, the STEM students more often agreed that COVID will negatively affect their education. The on-campus transfer students voiced a lot of agreement that this will have a negative effect on their education. We didn't see the online transfer students and the FTIC students sharing that concern as much. Among students who agreed that they felt that they were going to have a negative impact, they cited concerns over the quality of education. Some of the open-ended statements and concerns about shifting from a mix of online and face-to-face classes abruptly over to just solely online courses was jarring for the students. 80% of students reported an impact to their summer plans. And when we did an open text analysis of how these plans were affected, they cited no research experiences, no internships, or no volunteering. So those are 3 big things that really threw a wrench in their summer plans. And this is a word cloud of their responses, and you can see those things just popping out right there. Most students, 76%, report that COVID has not changed their immediate educational goals or career plans. We asked them, are you thinking about changing majors or career fields or any of that? Most said no. We are doing a follow-up survey. We have IRB approval for a follow-up survey in fall 2020, and we're going to ask the same questions, and it's going to be really interesting to see how this changes. I think we'd all agree that spring, June 2020 seems about a decade ago now, and things have changed and continue to change. We asked about the stress that students are experiencing. We asked students over the last 2 weeks, how often have you experienced feeling nervous, anxious, on edge? How often have you been not able to control your worrying? Students responded according to a Likert scale, their level of agreement. The darker red indicates the most strongest level of agreement, and then going through shades of lighter red and orange. What I want you to notice, what I notice, is all the red and orange that jumps out at me when I look at these plots. These students are stressed. I think it's safe to say it's not just, University of Florida students. I think all of our students here on this webinar, our students are experiencing intense stress, some more than others. I see the on-campus transfer track, which is kind of in the third row down. A lot of strong red and orange, a lot of agreement that they're experiencing severe stress and anxiety and worry. The STEM group is as well, although maybe not as intensely as that on-campus transfer group. So perhaps that having the STEM scholarship is buffering that stress just a little bit. The FTICs report a little less stress than the transfer students. When asked about the stress that they're experiencing related to meeting financial obligations if they're unable to work, we see a big difference again, and it's not surprising that the STEM students experience more stress in thinking about meeting financial obligations than our other student groups. The STEM scholarship program, of course, helps disadvantaged students, so it would make sense that they would feel the most stress about meeting financial obligations there. The FTIC group reported the least amount of stress in this area. Sorry, that was a blank slide there. We asked about food insecurity. We asked about the stress of providing enough food for themselves and their family. And for over half of all of our respondents, they indicated some level of concern or stress about providing enough food, which surprised me, admittedly, at first, but more so for the transfer students than the FTIC students. Again, the STEM students, the on-campus transfer students, all the transfer students, basically those top 3 rows, reported greater stress or concern related to food insecurity. Now, if we take a look at their socioeconomic status indicators, and we asked a few questions about this on the survey, we can see some really stark differences. When we look at the household income, 61% of the STEM students report a household income of less than $25,000. Compare that to the FTIC group, which is much lower. Even the online transfer group has much lower. Then you look at the students who reported an average annual household income of over $150,000. A third of our FTIC students fall in that category. None of the STEM students do. Maybe one of the on-campus transfer students do. So there's some stark differences there among their socioeconomic standing that may help explain some of the responses on the survey. Again, when we asked about the highest level of education completed by one of their parents, big differences. 78% of the STEM students report that the highest degree completed was less than a 4-year degree. FTIC, 28% report that. 45% of the FTIC students report having at least one parent with a graduate or professional level degree. 0, none of the STEM students report that. So the take-home message here is that the on-campus transfer students, both STEM and non-STEM students, are experiencing more of the COVID impact. Some of this is tied to their socioeconomic situation, but perhaps there's some silver linings. It looks like the STEM program is mitigating some of these factors. The STEM respondents do not report as severely as severe stressful situations for some of the indicators. They also have higher retention and GPA, and we will continue to track these students and look at longer term outcomes. So I think that overall the STEM program is doing what it's intended to do to help this population of disadvantaged students and help to level the playing field. So from the survey, what do we do? How do we help? For one, we are making it a priority to share mental health resources to our STEM students, pointing them in the right direction. University of Florida has many to share. There's also additional financial aid resources, things like Aid-A-Gator and programs like that. And we have a food pantry program at the University of Florida that we're making sure students are aware of. Our evaluator is with the University of Florida Extension and has a lot of connections there. So he is because based on his work with other projects that are studying COVID impacts and with our work, he is working now to connect resources for students around the state to bring in the social resources, financial resources, food and security resources, things like that, mental health resources, see what we can do to bring this all together for students. To address the concerns students had about not being able to do research during the summers, we are right now starting to gear up for summer 2021 and seeing if we can develop an online remote summer research experience program. We had 2 or 3 students who did kind of a pilot program this past summer of remote research opportunities. We had some mixed results with that, but with a little careful planning, we're going to gear up with that. We're also trying as a department to beef up all of our courses by integrating some research. So we are trying to integrate as many course-based undergraduate research experiences, cures, in our curriculum as we can, and these are all online cures so that we can integrate research and reach as many students as we can that way. And then we are giving a follow-up survey later this semester to see how these responses have changed and to take the temperature of everyone again. So I'm going to move forward. Oh, okay, there we go. Skip through it. So I'd just like to thank my collaborators and the team, the STEM team, Lexi Artisone, who did much of the analysis and the research presented here today, Eric Triplett, the chair of microbiology and the co-PI, Sebastian Galindo, who is our program evaluator, Dr. Wysocki and Dr. Turner, who are in CAL's administration, are so supportive of our programs, and our collaborators at Miami-Dade College and AAAS for organizing this event today, and then, of course, the National Science Foundation for awarding the STEM program and giving us a chance to help this interesting, diverse population of transfer students. So thank you.
Hi, I hope everyone can hear me. My name is Michelle Jones-Wilson. I am a professor of biochemistry and chair of the department at East Stroudsburg University. And what I'd like to talk to you about today is the success that we have had with our program, NSF-funded ClearPath. It's Community College Transfer Student Program. We actually have a partnership with 3 of our regional community colleges. We are in Northeast Pennsylvania, so fairly close to us is Lehigh Carbon Community College. That's up towards the Scranton-Wilkes-Barre area in Old Coal Country. Luzerne, which is a little bit further to the west, Luzerne County Community College, and Northampton Community College, which covers a large portion of the Lehigh Valley. So I'm here today presenting our research, but of course nothing is ever done by yourself. My ClearPath team is pictured here. This is a good portion of our team from our annual summer meeting. And so I'm highlighted in yellow, I guess, here, and to my right is Kathy Morris, our extremely valuable coordinator, PI Bonnie Green, faculty member Kristen Noblet, and another PI, Olivia Carducci. And then the remaining people pictured are actually from our community colleges, our liaisons, and I will talk about their work a little bit later. So I wanted to kind of tell you what we do at ClearPath. So lest you think maybe your students aren't like ours, and what were our goals, and how this kind of led us to redeveloping how we advise students. And COVID has actually evolved that again. We didn't go into this thinking that advising was going to be one of our big important keys. Turns out it is. Our overarching goal was to increase STEM student retention and to move these students along much more quickly towards their baccalaureate degrees. We had students who would come in transferring 60, 70, 80, 90 credits, and they were still 3 years away from getting a STEM degree. And honestly, that was rather heartbreaking when it came time to advise those students. Beyond a more timely degree completion, we wanted to increase the developmental mechanisms associated with student learning. And I won't have time really to talk about that today. We've done a lot of research in this area. But you're familiar with these things. Maybe you don't call them developmental mechanisms, but they're things like grit, professional future sense of self, etc. We also were working on increasing associate's degree completion because that's certainly critical for our partners and has become the clearest path to moving from the associate to the bachelor's degree. Of course, we wanted to get the students from community college, and when we got them to us, hopefully with about 45 to 60 credits, and then we pushed them through to finish their baccalaureate degrees in 4 semesters. We've called this lack of preparedness. We would sometimes have students coming in, and we quantified this for all the majors that we're supporting, that when we took students coming in with 45 or more credits, which should put them pretty close to junior status, okay, within shooting distance of junior status. And what we found across the board, that those students ranged anywhere from 30 to 60% ready to be juniors in terms of their STEM classes. And that's why we had, they were experiencing a much longer pathway than those 4 semesters to finish their degrees. So we called this, difference the transfer deficit. And we wanted to reduce that deficit for our scholars. This week in Inside Higher Ed, the cover story, which I have at the end of the presentation, was actually talking about the importance of the community college pathway to a 4-year degree. And one of the quotes really spoke to one of my co-PIs who sent it to me, and she said, transfer students on average lose about 40% of their credits when they enroll at a private college, compared to only 20% when they enroll at a public college. So great, but we don't want them even losing 20%. And I don't think they mean 20% really lost, but probably 20% that isn't applicable to the degree that they're actually seeking. Okay, so where are we? We're entering our 5th year now with ClearPath. We have supported, our original plan was 120 scholars. We enrolled 118, and then we had some small amount of attrition, and we replaced those attrition points. So overall, we have worked with 126 scholars. Our scholars are supported both at the community college and at East Stroudsburg University. They are supported financially, of course, with the STEM scholarship, but they are also supported with all of our other services that we offer, and I'll talk about those services. We want to investigate the relationship between the support we're providing and students' increased academic success, and we like to figure out what it is that we're doing that is helping our students to be successful so that we can refine what we're doing to be even more effective, because we don't have infinite resources, and we need to make sure that we're putting those resources where they are going to get the maximum effect to help our students. So, of course, the financial support provided by STEM, academic support, we have peer tutors that are paid for by our ClearPath program. They are selected by the PI, so they're high-quality tutors. And we generally get tutors assigned to students within 1 week of a request for tutoring. We're working on the developmental side, teaching students about how they're learning, about how they're thinking, a big emphasis on metacognition. We are providing students enhanced advising, and that's probably what I'm going to focus on much today is what our grant has shown us, but certainly what COVID has shown us about advising. Our students also have peer mentors who are trained and a host of cohort activities that help our students to feel part of our STEM community. So what do our students look like? Compared to our ESU STEM students, we have a larger percentage of underrepresented groups, more women. We have more non-traditional students. Interestingly enough, not as many first-generation students. I still don't know if I believe those data because I think we have some differences in definition of what first generation is. And certainly Pell-eligible students, we have a much greater Pell-eligible group of students. Our majors range. We have 10 majors that we support: biotechnology, chemical biotechnology, biochemistry, computer science, and computer security, and environmental science are our most popular degrees, but the math majors are certainly a respectable number, and physics isn't actually doing too badly along with our biotechs. So our interventions, we want to help our students, become better thinkers, become better scientists. We're doing this through what we call PDA advising, and that's advising which has 3 components: proactive, developmental, and advocacy. Our success seminars are given monthly with several opportunities for our scholars to attend, and these are seminars that focus on different aspects of learning and teaching our students to become better students. We really stress a common language, and that's from the community college. And by the way, our students, while at the community college, are getting advised. They're attending the success seminars. And then from the beginning all the way through to ESU, we try to make sure that everyone is using a common language when we work with our students. And then, of course, we certainly encourage, promote high-impact practices like research and internship. Just real quickly, I want to talk about common language because it's not something that we often think about. You know, from community to college to ASU, we use the same terms. We talk to our students about their learning and how they're learning. We're very upfront with our students that, you know, we are using you to learn how you learn so that we can help you learn more effectively and help others in the future to learn more effectively. All of our participants, our community college liaisons, our key personnel there, our tutors, our mentors, they are all trained in the appropriate language and the appropriate methods. And one kind of aside from this, beyond our scholars, is we have found that our tutors and our peer mentors who are not necessarily ClearPath scholars, some of our ClearPath scholars will be tutors, but our mentors are ESU, you know, straight STEM students, but those students have reported that ClearPath has had a positive impact on them and their ability to learn as well. So what I really want to focus on is what I have come to believe is a highly evolutionary process, and this is our PDA advising. So our 3 PIs lead additional advising. Our students at Eddie Stroudsburg University, we don't have professional advisors. All of our advisors are faculty advisors. So students get disciplinary advisors as soon as they declare a major. So they have their regular disciplinary advisor, but they also have one of the ClearPath PIs as their ClearPath advisor, and they meet with their disciplinary advisor, but they also meet with their ClearPath advisor at least once, generally twice or more per semester. And as a ClearPath advisor, I stay in communication with their disciplinary advisor and also their faculty for their courses. And I have required, because of course we can't really require anyone to do anything, but I think most of our scholars believe that it's required, and even more importantly, they find it helpful. So we really haven't had any issues with compliance with our students with working with us in advising. Our proactive advising, we like to call it practical proactive advising. At a student's transcript, maybe coming from community college, we look at the path that they've taken. We either talk with the student, talk with the student's advisors, look at their application materials, and sometimes we say, this student's really struggling in mathematics. Often those are the same students who don't want to reach out for help. So one thing that we have done is we do proactive advising. And we say to that student, you're going to start your Calc 2 class with a tutor. So from day one, they have a peer tutor, and we also facilitate study group formation. Developmental, I'm not going to have, sadly, much time to talk about that today, but that's something we do with our success seminars. And then our advocacy advising. And this is something that has become very important in our grant, and certainly has become more important post-COVID. Okay, so our CP advising model has been evolving. Really, what comes down in our advocacy model is the students really feel that someone has their back. And across the board, when our scholars have been surveyed throughout the years, of course, one of the number one things they say that helps them as a scholar is the scholarship. That makes complete and total sense, and we expect that to be the most important thing. But the second thing that stands out with very high correlation is with having their ClearPath advisor, they actually feel like someone has their back. This is a group of students who are more at-risk students, and feeling that they have someone in their corner is actually very important for them. So what's happening? Well, we are making progress. It's actually working. So this is our data. Pre-COVID, retention rate, 69% for our population of students in the general ESU population, our junior SEM students. 88% are our scholars. And 69%. So we've got a pretty good increase in terms of our retention. Our graduation rate is 80.5% of our students are graduating in 4 semesters of our scholars after transfer versus only 52% of other ESU transfer students. So we really are making a big, whack at that transfer deficit. Okay. And then, of course, there was COVID. We didn't return from spring break. We canceled classes in laboratories immediately. We transitioned to online. Our students moved out of their dorms. Our campus closed for pretty much completely for 3 months. We had very limited reopening in May and June. We were online all summer. East Stroudsburg University is online all fall. We have a very minimal student presence on campus, graduate programs, and some clinical practicums. So we are pretty much right now an online university. So we moved everything online, our virtual success seminars, our virtual scholar meetings, our virtual mentor meetings. We set up virtual scholar advising, predominantly through Zoom, and all of our peer mentoring and tutoring was moved to either Zoom or Google Meets. So what were our impacts? Well, we had one of our PIs, Dr. Green, set up something called the weekly tea. She loves to drink tea, So what she did was invite all of our scholars to join her. And this evolved because we had one of our scheduled success seminars. These are the things that work on helping the students metacognition. And one was scheduled right after our COVID closure. And our students were usually really active in these success seminars, and they pretty much, I think the best way to describe their affect was numb. We usually have a pre-success seminar assignment. Less than a quarter of them had done that. That's really atypical. And one thing that Dr. Green did in this seminar was she decided that she wasn't going to cover the topic she decided she had planned to cover. She pivoted to talking about coping with stress. And this was a seminar that we had given in November of 2019. And she said, you know what, we're going to deal with this again. After that session, the students requested that the stress coping strategies continued because they found that they were helpful. That's when the weekly teas were developed. And this was just another opportunity for the students to just log on in a very non-threatening way and talk about how they were doing, connect with each other, and connect with their faculty. So the T's kind of start with about a small 5-minute lesson generally on stress coping or talking about help-seeking behavior as a way to improve, self-advocacy, and then it was just kind of open discussion and support community. What we found is that our advocacy advising has really, and the T's have served as a touchstone. Students are reporting that it gives them a sense of normalcy, and having that group together to meet and drink tea or whatever they bring is letting them know that they are not alone. So that's all great on the qualitative side in terms of our anecdotal experience, but what about the data? So, we do our regular surveys of students, STEM, as part of our research, but we also administered an additional COVID-related survey this year. And so we looked at what did our students think of as and what did they perceive as the pre- and post-COVID changes to their STEM courses. 12.2% unfortunately found them to be more disorganized. I think probably we all felt that as instructors, especially when we had to make that very quick pivot in the spring. The students felt that they were actually maybe doing more work, but the quality of the work was less. 7.3% were experiencing significant challenges at home. Many of our scholars are parents, and they have children at home or they're trying to work from home. So, a number of them had challenges at home. Just general challenge, of life, 12.2%. 14.6% had concerns over their labs being disrupted. 17.7% were talking about problems with less ability to interact with their faculty. And believe it or not, 4.9% said they liked it online better. So how did the students perceive that COVID impacted their learning? And I think, our students kind of expected their GPAs to go down. They reported that there was 17.1% said, really no change, whereas, 73.2% said they felt they were learning less, and about 10% thought that they were actually able to do more. Okay, so what did our scholars want us to do? From qualitative analysis of the data, they felt that they were being extremely supported through ClearPath. When we asked them what could be done to improve their success, they said keep on doing what we're doing. The faculty advising, the mentoring, the success seminars, the additional opportunities to interact. And a significant number actually said that their other faculty, their disciplinary faculty, should be trained in ClearPath advising and how we were doing our advising. So, student suggestion, of course, they wanted some more tutors continue with the T, those opportunities, almost 25%. Training faculty and CP advising, it was kind of nice that some of our students were recognizing that we were doing something different. The continued support keep on at almost 30%. And some students wanted some modifications to the laboratory. Okay. We did experience some tutoring challenges. Our tutors were also stressed, and our tutors, some of them were trying to deal with their own issues at home. So unfortunately, our workload, our wait time to get a tutor increased a little bit. We're working on that now this semester, trying to solve that. We basically let our success seminars evolve into what the students said that they needed, a little less formal, but with more support. We're working on planning virtual events. Our cohort activities, kind of disappeared through the spring, and our students do appreciate their sense of community. So we're working on trying to do some virtual events and come up with increased opportunities for scholar interaction. So what's happening post-COVID? It's still working. Our spring 2020 to fall 2020 retention was not different, 88% before. We're at 89% right now. Although the students felt that they were learning less, they were more stressed, their GPAs were holding steady. We have a 3.147 mean or 3.35 overall GPA. Our spring admits, the students who kind of came in fresh in the spring, had a little bit lower mean, but their median was still strong, and that's a very small population. I think we only had about 9 students coming in, so 1 or 2 students underperforming can make a really big difference there. But overall, although our students felt like they were learning less, their GPAs were not significantly different than the GPAs of our scholars through all of our other cohorts. So I wanted to kind of sum up with talking about what we're doing in terms of supporting the scholars and what is our advocacy advising. When we started out with our advocacy advising, it was really more of a kind of campus navigation. Students were having issues with financial aid, or they were having issues with registration issues, and we worked to facilitate for them. Many of our students, being first-time students or transfer students, they really don't know how to navigate on campus. And sometimes what we see as little tiny obstacles for them are just big giant barriers. And sometimes that can derail them and actually have them leave the program. We did, career counseling, additional opportunities, what they can do with their degrees, their disciplines. We honestly did a lot of life navigation, and even social service referrals. We had significant amounts of housing and food insecurity among our population of students. And we worked with referring them to the appropriate social services. Transfer assistance, problems with getting transcripts and things counted correctly. And these are all things that, an advisor doesn't traditionally do, certainly not a secondary advisor. We have a reverse transfer program where students can transfer their East Stroudsburg University credits back to their community college. So let's say they left their community college with maybe 1 or 2 courses left to complete their associate. As soon as they complete the aligned course at East Stroudsburg University, they can transfer those credits back and be awarded their associate degree. That I don't know if that's unique to Pennsylvania. I do know it's not everywhere, and that is kind of a statewide agreement. We really provided a communication conduit sometimes between a student who was struggling and a faculty member or an advisor. Not really a mediator, but another person to talk to the student about maybe another point of view and maybe how they could do something differently to move forward a little better in a situation. And as I said before, I think especially post-COVID, we're doing a lot more of the social services referral, providing the communication conduits, serving with life navigation, and being a kind of touchstone to still stay connected with the university community. I think it's working really well because we're very flexible. We looked at what our survey said the students needed, and we're trying to meet that. We're working on helping our mentors. Our students have peer mentors, and we're training those mentors in additional ways, and their peer mentors are still connecting with them during COVID. Our ClearPath coordinator is also another resource for our students. Any student who is at risk in our program, who is our probationary status, which means their GPA for a semester falls below 2.8, they receive extra advising from the PIs. So basically we're on their case a little, but in a supportive way, and they have to develop a plan. And we continually look at the progress of that plan to keep them on track. And we're trying to keep the students connected. And we do have quite a bit of evidence that our students do feel connected to our ESU community, even while they're at the community college, because 84% of our scholars that we supported at community college end up matriculating to ESU, and it certainly isn't required that they do so. There are a number of them that stop at the associates, and some who go to another university after they've been with ClearPath at their community college. But 84% of them are actually sticking with our campus community and moving to ESU. Okay. So, of course, this week in higher ed was transfer as the new path to the BS. That's where I took the quote that I talked about at the very beginning. It's a really interesting article. I think many of us already know this, but certainly given the cost of higher education, we ignore the population of transfer students at our own peril. So this is a really good article that came out this week. I apologize, my acknowledgement slide is not in the presentation, but I would like to acknowledge my ClearPath team, Provost Joanne Bruno, our external evaluator, John Darcinis, and our community college liaisons, and of course, the NSF DOE for supporting us. So I guess at this we'll move on to the question period.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing your survey results on the impacts of COVID-19. And thank you so much to Michelle for sharing how you actually made program modifications and enhancements to better support students during this critical time through advocacy advising. So right now we will transition to our Q&A segment of the presentation, and we have about 30 minutes. So if you have questions, attendees can actually post those questions in the questions box. But to help us better route the questions to both panelists, if you could write either Jennifer or Michelle at the beginning of your question, that will definitely help us better route your questions for the remaining 30 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like some questions have started to come in, and the first question I've been alerted to, this is Jennifer again, is the part-time policy a permanent change? And I do not know the answer to that. That's a question directly to the NSF. I know that in the RFA that was put out in late spring 2020, the eligibility statement describes students being eligible as long as they are more than half-time. So more than half-time, however, that's defined by your institution. But I think we'll have to get more clarification from the NSF for that one.
I could go ahead and take the second question. It says, under COVID-19 for students, what would be morale boosting? I think one of the things, a morale boosting initiative, I think one of the things that we found that COVID has, I think with all of us personally, we can speak to this, is that COVID has made us feel much more isolated. And meetings with students, even though it's via Zoom, with, kind of cameras on and microphones on, even if it sometimes gets a little raucous, it is something that's absolutely critical in keeping that sense of normalcy for our students. To know not only, is there someone out there, but there are people who they're feeling what they're feeling, and, someone will state something and everybody else chimes in. And I think our students leave that time really feeling not alone, and kind of more able to tackle what's in front of them.
Question here, can I share the COVID impact survey? Yes, I anticipated some interest, and I spoke to Sebastian Galindo, our evaluator, who we developed it together. He really developed it, and we just modified it for our purposes. But yes, we can do that. And I see your email, and so I'm writing that down, and I will be in touch.
Okay, so while we wait for other questions to come into the question box, I actually have a question for both of you, Jennifer and Michelle, and that's have any best practices emerged as a result of having to address COVID-19 from your specific projects to help us better support highly talented, low-income STEM students that you can summarize from both of your projects?
Well, I can chime in first. I think that's a difficult question to answer, but I think for one is that we, something that struck me as I was preparing this talk is that because we have a pretty transparent and open working relationship with our evaluator, when we just started thinking about, we need to survey our students or reach out to our students, we were there ready to go. So we were able to put the survey in motion right away. And I think that's one best practice that I would emphasize and advocate for, working a lot with your evaluator, because they really have some keen insights and perspectives they can bring.
It is difficult to kind of come up with one thing. I would say in terms of how we've moved, our best practice has been to listen to our students and ask them what they need, not us try to decide what it is that they need. I think sometimes we have preconceived notions of what we think will help them, and sometimes they're right and sometimes they're wrong. So listening, especially in this time of really high stress, is, I think, absolutely critical.
Thank you. And I think we have some questions that have come in from the audience.
What is it possible to receive speaker emails? Yes. I don't know if those will be sent out to everyone, or if they're on the.
We can include them on.
Okay. That's fine with me.
Great. I'll take, if you're okay, Jennifer, I'll take the best practices for improving food security of the transfer students.
That'd be great.
So we've done two things. One, we have a food pantry on our campus. It's actually run by retired faculty in conjunction with one of our local churches. So when we have students who are food insecure, sometimes we will even kind of make the reach out for them to go to the food pantry. Sometimes some students are unwilling to seek that assistance. Additionally, I've been on campus, kind of drives me crazy, but 21 years now. So, I know a lot of people on campus. I know a lot of people in administration, and I have no qualms about calling someone in dining and seeing what we can do, especially if this is a temporary food insecurity. Can we get some meal cards? We have been able at times to provide temporary housing to a student who is made homeless and things like that. So sometimes it's using your capital on campus. The worst thing someone can do is tell you, no, we can't do that. But what I found more often than not is people will assist when you ask.
I see a question. I think it was, 962. Did you have to make adjustments with IRB to add the survey to your project? Yes, we did. We submitted an addendum to our existing IRB along with the survey and when we were going to implement it and all that, and it was approved pretty easily.
I'll go ahead and take the next one. It says, hello, asking this question as someone who conducts either research or evaluation on a few STEM grants. To what extent has the research and or evaluation designs or strategies have been modified in the COVID data collection time period? We used our regular annual survey that we give to our students, but then we also did an additional survey for specific to the impact of COVID, but also to use that to inform where we've seen changes in our, in our regular survey. If it's okay, I'll go ahead and grab the next one since it's to me. So what training do we do with our mentors? Our mentors are formally trained. We don't have anything canned right now, but we have published on our mentor training, so I would be happy to send you those references. Also, we do have some of our mentor training data that is on our Open Science framework, so I would be happy to share that with you. And as I said, it's interesting that our mentors actually feel that they learn quite a bit by being part of ClearPath.
Let's see, for question 976, have you experienced reductions in COVID resources such as staff furloughs, budget cuts, and if so, has this impacted the ability? We are very fortunate that we have not experienced reductions in staff or furloughs at this time.
I wish I could say differently. We have had very significant cuts, particularly among our adjunct faculty, which has significantly impacted our course loads this fall, class sizes, some of the other things, and a large number of furloughs on campus. So it has been a difficult period through the summer and through the fall.
Do you have students who are not responding? How do you get them to try to respond? So our students, we always have students who we have to kind of just keep, nudging them to respond to surveys and things like that, depending on what we're asking them to respond to. When we gave the COVID survey, that was out to everybody. It wasn't just STEM students, so we didn't single out and try and get them to respond. We'll give the survey again. But when we have STEM survey specific things, then we do a lot of nudging and following up and, hey, we need you to chime in, and eventually that we get the responses we need.
Yes, we do the same thing. We nudge and nudge and nudge, and I I always find sometimes I feel like I'm dealing with my scholars the same way I deal with my 12-year-old son about getting his online homework submitted. So we just continue, we keep at it, and we just keep asking. And, you know, I'm amazed. Our scholars across the board, they, I think, feel, because they feel supported and feel part of our team, we don't usually have too many scholars who don't respond.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take the next one. Question. It says, I'm the external evaluator for an STEM initiative in California. Our STEM cohorts are still at the community colleges, and the students reported in our survey that losing the opportunity to be on campus and feel like a student is a major challenge. The students reported that being part of the STEM cohort community is very important to them, and that their mentor relationships are extremely helpful. We have matched our STEM students with each other in a buddy system, but are still trying to find additional ways to connect students with each other online and build the STEM cohort community. Any innovative ideas? And here's a quote from one of our students. During this time, every student's norm has been uprooted, and we're faced with dealing with so many more challenges that we used to be able to escape while we're at school. Issues that were present before have been compounded. You are all doing a wonderful job of being supportive. If students aren't regularly participating in opportunities that you're creating, it isn't because it isn't valuable. It's because people don't know how to feed their families. I can absolutely relate to that. And I think this is where some of our advocacy advising, has come in, working with students. I think maybe because of being an additional advisor, our students believe that they can kind of talk to us and share things. And being able to facilitate for them wherever we possibly can is really important. And I think our group meetings help them to stay part of the community. We did take, every semester, we have taken a group trip. We literally load up 2 to 3 buses with our scholars and their families. It is a grant-supported trip, and we go to a science museum. We all spend a day together once a semester. And unfortunately, in the spring, we could not do that. And right now, we are looking for additional ways to maybe do that online. We're actually looking at maybe some virtual tours of museums. So we're still trying to put that opportunity together.
Question 85. Someone asked about building morale among the students. I apologize if I missed it, but what types of virtual activities have you done to build morale among the STEM recipients? They directed this question to me, although I think, Michelle, your example of the tea was wonderful, and I jotted that down and thought that was a great idea for myself, and I'd love to have 5 minutes a week or month to kind of spend on stress, coping with stress mechanisms and just sharing and things like that. I think that's a great one. We have online meetings, gatherings. We don't call them teas or anything as well. For our program, because it is already it's not exclusively online, but we kind of already have an online culture built in. The students were used to having events in a virtual setting, so that wasn't as dramatic a shift for them once COVID happened. But we just met with them earlier this week and just chatted, and they shared some of their situations. And we have a discussion board for students that they can chime in on whenever they like, and that sort of thing. Let's see, but we're both listed for question 83. Both of you described that students thought that their GPAs declined, but they didn't. Do you know why there was such a gap between student grade expectations and reality? I thought that was really interesting, too, that we both reported this, Michelle.
Absolutely.
In the case that I was thinking about this in the case for our program, I think that it's possible that the students, there was a range. Overall, they didn't decline. It's possible that the ones who took the survey happened to be the ones who did have a decrease, and they felt like they had more to say, and therefore they chose to take the survey and voice their concerns. It was just sort of a sampling scenario. It also could have been that maybe they just thought that their GPAs would have gone up. They were planning a big spring semester and they thought their GPAs were going to go up, and they didn't, and therefore they see them as a decrease instead of an increase. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think our students are harder on themselves than they should be. I think their uncertainty and their stress led to that worry of the GPA going down. And they were feeling, because everything was unfamiliar. So our students, the pivot to online was very different than yours, because we were nothing online, including often getting together as groups and subgroups of scholars, 2, sometimes 3 times a month. So for our students, I think having that pulled away made them feel uncertain, but they were actually still doing a pretty good job. I don't think that they were giving themselves enough credit for the job that they were doing.
Yeah. I can see that as well. And a follow-up question go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Jennifer.
I was just saying, another question that builds off of that is, could it be that online learning will positively impact a STEM students' academic success? Now, I come from an online background, so I think there is a very good chance that it could positively impact a STEM student success. I think for certain students, I'm not going to say for all students, but, I just as, it's going part-time is not always a negative outcome for some types of students. I think going online is giving some students in some circumstances some positive outcomes that maybe they couldn't get in other face-to-face environments. So I think online education, it can really expand the horizons in a lot of ways and reach a lot of different students.
I think there certainly are some things that we can do online that we can do very well. Certainly our difference between the spring and what I'm able to do now with having the summer to kind of turn the guest bedroom into a little mini broadcasting studio. And my learning through the summer, I'm doing a much better job teaching, physical biochemistry than I did in the spring. So I think some things can be done fairly well. My major concern is the impact on the practical skills that the students generally learn in laboratory. And I think we all know that while some things we can enhance online, students need to have the pipette in their hand to learn how to pipette.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we are with our shift to I don't want to say online or virtual labs, because they're getting kits. In our case, in the microbiology program, we're sending students kits with pipettes and tools and things like that they need to do their wet labs, microbiology labs at home. And so they are, it's not the same as the teaching lab experience, and the students are acutely aware of that and comment on that, but they are learning those skills. I think part of it is being more intentional and transparent with them and telling them, you are learning, you aren't missing out on any skills. You may be doing it in your in your kitchen instead of in the teaching lab, but you are doing that. But I do know that for many of them, they want the full experience. Can't argue with that. We are going to look at data on that and see how students do in these online remote lab formats compared to our historical data where students were there in the teaching labs with all the equipment and supplies and tools they needed.
Yeah, we're also, for our lower level courses, kind of doing a kitchen chemistry approach and sent home kits with the students. The difficulty becomes in the upper division courses. It's kind of hard to send them home with a 500 megahertz NMR or fluorescent spec. So this semester, in one of my courses, all of my students, one of my senior level courses, are fairly, they're within an hour and a half of campus, and they actually requested, is there any way that, we can do some kind of on-campus lab, and I obtained permission for that. So we'll have some essential labs that actually will occur on campus this semester with social distancing and masks and a lower number of students. I'll have only 3 students in the lab at any one time. So.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Were there any other closing thoughts from you, Jennifer or Michelle?
No, I see lots of requests for the survey, and it looks like the requests will be compiled so that we can connect that up with everyone.
Yes. So I just wanted to, thank you all for joining us today. I'm really, really glad that both Jennifer and Michelle could share their efforts to support our students at this critical time in the country. We really appreciate your work and your team's work. We have a number of questions for follow-up, so we will send out a follow-up email tomorrow that includes the contact information for both Jennifer and Michelle. And as I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we will share the slides as well as the webinar recording by Friday. We want to give our panelists enough time to update and edit, make any edits to their slides and include any other information that they might want to share. So look out for a follow-up email tomorrow that will have the contact information for Michelle and Jennifer, and then by Friday, please check back on our STEM website, and we should have the recording and the slides. So at the end of this webinar, when we adjourn, please look out for the post-webinar survey. It's really, really important to complete this survey just to let us know how you're enjoying these webinars and any other topics you might be interested in. So as soon as we end in the next minute or so, definitely look for that survey. Please share any resources or publications or other information that you want disseminated to the STEM community to Allison at agonzalez@AAAS.org. And then finally, we would love for you to follow us and share your efforts, particularly related to supporting STEM students during this COVID transition or other projects or follow us on LinkedIn, and that's at the AAAS STEM Initiative, and follow us on Twitter, and that's STEM_program. Thank you all again for joining us, and have a great evening.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.